All right, great to be joined by former U.S. Congressman Jim Renacci from Ohio. And Jim, good to see you. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, Tom. How are you?
I'm doing fine, doing fine. A lot going on in Ohio as we get to this November 5th election. And want to talk about issue one, want to talk about Ohio's impact on the presidential race. But let's talk a little bit about the U.S. Senate race there with Bernie Moreno taking on longtime Democrat incumbent Sherrod Brown. It sure would be good to see a Republican pick up there.
Well, absolutely. And again, it would be very important for us to make sure we control the Senate no matter what happens. I do think we're going to control the Senate from the standpoint of we're going to get West Virginia, almost certainly, Montana. That takes us to 51. It'd be great to get to 60. I don't think we're going to get there. But every seat above 51 just gives us more room, especially because in 2 years, there are another set of candidates that are going to have to run, and the map is probably in the Democrats' favor in a couple of years. So it's best to get as many Republican senators as we can, which would be important, and that's why Bernie Moreno defeating Sherrod Brown would add to that, that's for sure.
Last I saw, $259 million spent in that Senate race, the most expensive Senate race of 2024.
Yeah, I've seen that too, and it's interesting. A lot of outside money coming in for Bernie Moreno, a lot of money from crypto and a lot of money from other organizations, the Senate fund. So this has become an important race and a way of shoring up the Republicans' Senate seats. So it's interesting. I mean, you look back, there have not been that much money. And one of the reasons why a lot of times outside money stays away from Ohio is because it is an expensive state. It's an extremely expensive state, and we're seeing that now. I mean, it's 7 media markets. It's a difficult place to defeat an incumbent, and so a lot of times the outside money has stayed away from Ohio. I'm glad to see it's coming in this time for Bernie Moreno.
You know, when you look at Ohio, you always think about out of those 88 counties, the majority of them are rural counties. They're MAGA counties. They're Trump counties. They're conservative people, just like most of us here in the tri-state. But then you look at Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Toledo, the Akron area, Dayton area. It seems like that's where a lot of the Kamala votes are going to come from. It seems like that's where the more liberal folks are from, right?
Right, and that's where the Sherrod Brown votes are going to come from. Look, if you go back to my Senate race 6 years ago, you'll see that I believe I won 81 counties by 300,000 votes, but I lost 7 counties by 600,000 votes. Those are the counties you just talked about. Those are the urban counties, Cuyahoga County, Hamilton County, Franklin County, all of those counties, which are strongholds for Democrats. The way to win a statewide race, of course, is to get as many Republicans as you can in all the 80 counties around those 7 or 8 counties. And then in those 7 or 8 counties, do the best to get as many Republicans and independents as you can. That's the way you win. That's got to be Bernie's solution to winning. I guarantee you that is what Sherrod Brown's doing. He started a campaign in those 7 counties a year ago. Long before the primaries were even put in place, he had people in those counties. So he does know those 7 counties are important. And not that the other 80 counties aren't important. You got to build up momentum there. But a lot of people don't realize this, the state of Ohio is really the make or break decision will be in 7 or 8 counties.
Seems like Sherrod Brown is running to the center, trying to act like he's a buddy to Republicans.
Well, Sherrod Brown always does that. Again, I've watched him, and of course I was involved 6 years ago. He is one of the most liberal senators in the United States Senate, yet every time he comes up for re-election, he runs to the center, and people believe him. I mean, the one thing I found running against him is he's a likable person. That's what gets him the votes. There are Republicans that are going to vote for him. That's just the way it is, and there are independents that like him. So Bernie Moreno has to be able to win over those people who, may vote for Donald Trump, but then will turn around and say, yeah, but I'm okay with Sherrod Brown. Bernie's got to get those people.
Yeah. What's the biggest issue for Bernie? What does he really need to capitalize on here in the stretch?
Well, look, I think it's name ID. He's starting to pick that up. You go back a month ago before all the money came in for him, a lot of people didn't know who he was. Now they're getting to know who he is. And the question is, once you get to know who somebody is, what are their policies and what do they stand for? So Bernie's in that stage, first time running statewide. There are people that still don't know him. I mean, I was at a dinner just last week where somebody asked me, who's Bernie Moreno? And I thought, wow, it's amazing the people that don't know the candidates, many times because they just aren't paying attention, but also they're not watching TV. They're not watching the shows where all these commercials are on, and they really aren't paying attention. That's part of the problem with our electorate. It comes down to name ID in many, many cases. And the other thing it really is likability. Bernie has to become likable to those people because Sherrod Brown has already convinced them he's likable.
Mm. Yeah, I think one of the things that Bernie needs to do is to continue to paint Brown with the Harris Walls team. I mean, I think that's winning. And on issues such as the transgender sports stuff, and I've seen those commercials, and Brown trying to back away from that, but I think it's clear that Democrats and people like Sherrod Brown, Kamala Harris, Tim Walz are for more biological males going into the locker rooms and the dressing rooms, the bathrooms of girls, playing against girls teams. This kind of stuff's ridiculous, and I don't think that's going to be a winning issue for Democrats anywhere if the people know about it.
What's funny, that is the Republican issue across the country. So because I'm involved in a PAC that is involved nationally, I can tell you that Republicans are using that against every Democrat, Senate candidate, against every Democrat that's running. They're using that. And of course, Democrats are coming back with the abortion issue. And that's what they're going after Bernie on. But they're going across the country on that issue. So that's the real key. I mean, there are people out there that really believe, especially in Ohio. I mean, Ohio has changed. It used to be a pro-life state. When I first ran for office for the U.S. House of Representatives back in 2010, 62% believed in pro-life. Today, that's only about 48 or 49%. There's a large majority now that believe that we should have abortions. Now, not me. I mean, I'm a pro-life candidate. I've always been pro-life, but I can tell you, I'm just telling you the sentiment of Ohio. So if Sherrod Brown can get those 60% to say, you know what, I want to have women's rights, as they call it, or whatever, that's going to be the issue for Bernie. On the other hand, I agree. If Bernie can come around and talk about the transgender issues, that's going to be positive for him too.
You're with Jefferson Rising, the JeffersonRisingFund.org, and one of the big things is to restore American sovereignty, and that's the border issue. Ohio's really become the epicenter as a border state, even though it's not a border state. Every state's a border state now with the amount of illegals coming in. But with what is happening in Springfield and what is happening in other cities of that size, I mean, we've got to be vigilant everywhere in America that is happening, that illegals are taking over, insurance rates are skyrocketing, people, their homes, their lives are in danger in many cases. And it's just simply not the right way to go about things. I mean, it's one thing to have legal immigration, but to have thousands of migrants brought in from Haiti and dumped into one town, that changes everything.
Well, and I would agree with you, but we got to remember that the ability to bring Haitians in was actually approved by the federal government, which I don't agree with. I didn't agree with in 2019, and that the influx of Haitian refugees is not only Ohio, it's across the country. Charleroi, Pennsylvania, right across the border, is almost full of Haitians. It's been discussed that are using that are living in that town as well. We've got Springfield. We've got all these communities around our country. And I would agree with you. Look, we're not prepared for it. First, we do need legal immigration. And when I was in Congress, we talked about that all the time. We need legal immigration. The problem is We have too many illegals coming over. We've allowed Haitians to come over. And again, my sympathy goes out to them. They should have a process, but you can't dump that many into a community. And I blame, in many cases, the states for allowing that to happen because, you know, whether it's Governor DeWine or the governor in Pennsylvania, they all know the Haitians are coming into these areas. You got to prepare for it or say no. I bet you Governor DeSantis would say, no way, we're not bringing them here. We're not prepared for them. Just a different way of operating. But it starts with the federal government. It's something that definitely has to be changed.
Yeah, without a doubt. We're talking with former U.S. Congressman Jim Renacci about election issues. The Tom Roten Show is driven by Martin Transport, now hiring Class A CDL truck drivers for their Canova, West Virginia terminal. See Lance Schultz and apply online at martintransport.com. That's martintransport.com. Jim, let's talk about this issue one. It seems like, new election, new issue one in Ohio. And I really think that that's confusing to a lot of voters because you've had an issue one the last 3 elections now.
Well, Tom, you're exactly right. Issue one has become very confusing to people that vote electors. I mean, they're sitting there saying, I thought we already voted for this. I thought we already passed it. Or I thought we already voted against it. And the answer is it is an issue one, but it's a different issue one. And this one will change the face of politics in Ohio forever. Now, I've traveled the state. I've talked to groups. I've talked to groups after they've talked to those that are proponents of it. I've had to go in and talk to the same group. And at least I hear what their arguments are. They're arguing that, look, we have a system right now that was rejected by the Ohio Supreme Court multiple times, and we need to fix it. That's their argument. The other thing that they have done very well is they've pinned this as citizens over politicians. And let's face it, when I go into a room and I say, hey, how many of you do not like politicians? I mean, the majority of people put their hand up. So that framing of citizens over politicians is important for the proponents because it's a winning framing. Now, what people don't understand is what's in the draft and then in the changes that would occur. And it's so simple, Tom. I don't need to go through all the details of 15 people or whatever. Here's what I tell people: if you vote yes, if you vote yes, you are voting to set up a whole nother bureaucracy. And then I'll ask people, how many of you don't like bureaucracies? They all put up their hand. I go, great. If you don't like bureaucracies, why would you vote to build a bureaucracy that's unaccountable to the citizens and paid for? I said, that right there should be enough to vote no. And the answer always is, yeah, but we got to change something. And I said, I was just in a group yesterday. I said, yeah, okay, I agree we may have to change something, but don't change it to an unaccountable bureaucracy that costs us more money. And I hope that continues to permeate because that really is the winning message. This isn't about Republicans or Democrats. This is about a process that will build a whole nother bureaucracy of 15 people, unaccountable to the citizens, to make decisions. And at least the current system, whether you like it or not, we have 7 elected officials who are accountable. Now, Tom, I also turn around and say, you know what, I really want the simple answer to all this? Everybody, whether it's the 7-member commission or the legislature or even this new commission, they're all going to hire a consultant. They're all going to hire they're all going to get a computer program, and they're going to run the system and come up with their maps. Why do we need to put a bureaucracy on top of all that? Let's just come up with an accountable process to get a consultant and a computer to draw the maps. And that's the simplest thing we could do.
Yeah. So how bad could this get if issue one passes? Just give us a scenario of what this is going to look like down the road.
Well, look, the advocates of this system are saying that Ohio's legislature and the congressional districts do not really represent the majority of citizens. And they say that because they believe that Ohio, although it's a Republican state, is only a Republican state by 8 percentage points. So, 54, 46, something like that. They believe that the legislature and the congressional district should be a 54-46 split. So the district should be gerrymandered. So that's what it will be. They will gerrymander the districts to get to 54-46. So it's a form of gerrymandering. But what that does, if it's successful, is they will change the face of how many Republicans, for instance, in the House and Senate, we have supermajorities in the state House. That will go away. In the congressional districts, we pretty much have a supermajority, 10-5. That will go away. It'll probably be 8-7, 9-6, something like that. The numbers will change drastically because the districts will be engineered to get to a 54-48, 54-46 geography, which I think is concerning because you really can't gerrymander based on voting. You got to gerrymander, you got to set up districts based on what's in the best interest to the counties. You don't want to put a urban county, you don't want to have a congressperson in an urban county and a rural county if you can avoid it, because issues are so much different. It'd be good to have members of Congress the way they are today put into districts to pretty much match, the people that they are representing. Yeah.
It's very concerning, and yet at the same time, I think a lot of people are confused, and maybe they're tired of this. Issue 1 in the last 2 years was, or the last 2 elections rather, was just very. It did not go the way conservatives want. So I can understand why there's concern here on this.
Well, Tom, the other thing people have to understand is 85% of the money coming in on issue 1 is all from the outside. Even some money from Switzerland to try and a billionaire in Switzerland. So this is an issue that's really not going to be changed based by Ohioans. It's an issue that's being changed by people outside of Ohio. And right there should be a reason why people vote no on issue 1.
Yeah. And with going back to the other issue 1, there was a lot of outside money then spent too, right?
There was outside money on issue 1 in August, issue 1 in November. I am concerned about these issue 1s because they are left-leaning issues, and it will drive people to vote. There are people that are going to go vote in this election who are really going just to vote for issue 1. And then what happens to the down ballot vote? So that's a whole nother issue for Republicans, because if there are people that lean left that maybe would not have voted but are going to go out and vote in this election, and they lean left and they go and they vote down ballot, they're going to vote for Kamala Harris, or they're going to vote for Sherrod Brown. They're going to vote for people on the left, which will actually swing, the votes against some Republicans. It's one of the reasons why, and I know some of your listeners might not agree with this, but I've seen polling at Jefferson Rising that shows the president is not going to get to 8% this cycle. That there is a little bit of a left lean coming in that will bring him. He's still going to win Ohio. I don't think anybody would question that. I just don't know if he's going to get the 8% or not.
And with an Ohio U.S. senator as his running mate, that's concerning. You would think that he would be at 8 or better. But let's talk about this presidential race. And I watched, like you, the 2 presidential candidates debate, and quite honestly, and again, I of course I'm going to vote for Trump, but Trump seemed angry. Kamala somehow was able to maybe resonate with some of those voters that were in the middle, had made up their mind. It made her more of a viable candidate, in my opinion. Just as an outsider looking in, not looking at it from a conservative perspective. Then I watched the vice presidential debate, and I think a lot of people who were in that same camp that really don't pay attention a whole lot, they probably looked at those 2 candidates and thought, wow, I really like how they handled the issues and so forth. It went a lot better between Vance and Walz. However, the left brilliantly covered up who Tim Walz really is. I mean, he seemed like a regular guy, just like a normal Democrat that you would have seen 20 years ago. That's not who he is. He's a radical leftist.
Well, it's interesting. I 100% agree with you. Look, I think the first debate just destroyed President Biden. I mean, he looked like he was incapable of ever being president again. So you would have thought that gave President Trump a big push. In fact, I think after that, it was going to be a blowout election. Then it comes down to Kamala Harris and former President Trump, and she made him mad. She got under his skin. His responses were not good. Now, what's funny, if in our country and our state is made up of the diehard Trump person, and then there's the diehard anti-Trump person. So after that debate, if you talk to the two sides, and I try and be objective, I really do. I mean, people want me to be in the diehard Trump. I can't understand why you're not. Look, I try and be as objective as possible because I'm on so many shows that I want to give an objective position. And I do believe that Trump did not look good in that second debate. She was able to get him. She was able to get under his skin. Those are all problems. But by the way, those are what if she wins, those will be the reasons he's defeated. Because people want to see somebody who's compassionate and likable. And anytime they can show former President Trump as being erratic and non-emotional, that really hurts him. So what's really interesting is we had a meeting yesterday in Jefferson Rising, and we talked about a number of the issues. And one question came up: what does former President Trump have to do, and what does Kamala Harris have to do to win this race? And there was consultants on the call, and I can tell you that here's what the answer was. Former President Trump has to maintain a likable atmosphere. He's got to go to the McDonald's. He's got to do the things that he's doing. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, has to quit talking about herself because that does not help her. She's got to start talking about the bad side of former President Trump. January 6th, all those things. Now remember, these are consultants talking, not me. And that's how she wins the race. How he wins the race is just continue to be likable. So he has the better chance of winning. That's why I think the odds are moving in his favor, because his team has told him, be likable. Don't do things that cause issues. And I think that's probably the direction over the next few weeks as we get to Election Day.
Yeah. Well, and I think people that go to his rallies and so forth and some of the more personal interviews, they see that side of Trump. When he's talking about Corey there that was killed and his family in Butler, PA, when you see the compassion that he has for the people in Western North Carolina. But on the national stage, he missed that opportunity. They did not see that side of him. I'm talking about for the undecideds and so forth. But talk about that VP debate. You served, I believe, with Walz in Congress. What's he really like?
Well, look, when I served with Walz and look, I got to know him. I used to have a bipartisan breakfast with both sides of the aisle where we could talk about issues. Didn't mean we have to agree, just talk. He was actually part of the breakfast. He was a moderate. He was a likable guy. So that's the Walz that I got to know. Now, I would agree, he became governor of Minnesota, and he became what was necessary for him to get reelected in Minnesota, which is that radical left governor. It's one of the things I hate about politicians and politics is that people morph into what they need to be to get elected versus being what you really are to get elected. And that's what he's done. So now he's become, but by the way, so did President Biden. I mean, President Biden was probably the most moderate president around. He worked with both sides of the aisle, but to become president, he morphed over to a far left president, which, for 40 plus years, he was not. Now he is.
So talk about Tim Walz as governor of Minnesota and what happened in Minneapolis, St. Paul in the summer of 2020, the George Floyd riots and so forth, and the hypocrisy of paintballing people for sitting out on their porch after a certain curfew, not allowing people to go to church, calling people non-essential, but yet Antifa and BLM rioters were able to get away with just about anything they wanted, and then he and Kamala bailed them out of jail.
Yeah, it's one of the issues that he's going to have to defend himself on. But again, I just don't think the vice president is going to make a decision in these elections. We can talk about the pluses and minuses of both vice president candidates. In the end, this is going to be between Harris and Trump. People will not cast their vote based on Walz or J.D. Vance. I mean, because look, there was a whole bunch of attacks on J.D. as well. But I think people have forgotten about all that. This is really going to come down to, and Tom, I got to tell you, yesterday we were talking about this. It is pretty much, 47 right now. The 47 that are locked into Trump, they're not leaving Trump. The 47 that are locked into Kamala, they're not leaving her. All right? That means you got 6% that everybody's going after. And the question is, how do you get those 6%? Now, 6%, and I say this all the time, and we're getting confirmation of this from people who are going out and knocking on doors. Those 6% are not undecided. They're decided. They're decided they hate both candidates. They don't like Trump. They don't like Kamala. And the question is whether they're going to vote. That's the real question. This race will be decided based on whether those 6% vote or not, or it is going to be a really close race. I still believe it's going to be a really close race because I believe those 6%ers, majority of them, are not going to come out and vote.
How much of a difference does RFK Jr. make for Trump?
You know what? At first I thought it was helpful, but if you notice, he's been pushed aside. He's got baggage, and I don't think I think Trump liked to bring him in, but he has the baggage. Just like Tulsi Gabbard coming in as well. I mean, she's been traveling the country with as a surrogate to Trump. But if you really look at her history and her voting record, I mean, she has an F rating with guns. She's got when it comes to life, she's got a horrible rating. I mean, so she was a very liberal Democrat as well. So does the female voter look to Tulsi and say, hey, I like her, I'm going to vote for her? Maybe the independent, but a Republican, if you look at her background, same as Kennedy. Kennedy's got some issues that I don't know if they help. And I think that's why you're seeing Kennedy's kind of been pushed to the side. You don't see him on stage anymore. He gave the endorsement. He has his own problems. He has a few legal problems. And I think that's where they're leaving it with him.
So in the end, do those undecideds or ones that got to make a decision, even if they don't like either candidate, specifically Pennsylvania, Georgia, the other swing states, and presuming that everything's fair in the election, will Trump win?
Well, I think we're leaning toward Trump winning. Yes, I think he's doing the right things. And in the next couple of weeks, those 6%, a few of them are going to come his way. I think that's what's going to be important. But we still have 2 weeks left. So, I do believe former President Trump wins. But it's not going to be a blowout. Now, I've heard people say, this is going to be a blowout election. Trump's going to get 320, electors. He may. I mean, anything could happen. But I just believe it's going to be very close. And who knows? I've been wrong before. I could be wrong again. I'm just seeing the data. And the data shows that it's going to be very close. It shows that the Senate is going to be, the data we were talking about yesterday says we're going to get the majority in the Senate. But, we're probably going to get only to 52 senators, maybe 53 at best. The data is also showing that the House is a toss-up. So, what does that mean? It's all about those people who get out and vote.
Yeah. If Trump does win and J.D. Vance has to resign as a U.S. Senator, there'll be an open seat there. Would you be in consideration to be appointed to that position or run for that position?
Well, it's interesting, Tom, and remember I ran against Mike DeWine twice now. I doubt. And now the sad thing is, and I know this is politics and I've learned to accept it, Mike DeWine will appoint who Mike DeWine wants to appoint. And it'll usually be somebody, and I'm not condemning him for this, but I realize it'll usually be somebody who's been affectionate and supportive of him. So even though qualification-wise, I probably should be in the running only because I ran for Senate, I've been in Washington, I understand the issues. I do understand when you run against somebody who's making the decision, it probably will not be me. So I have stood back on that and watched the other individuals who all want it, from Vivek to others who have expressed an interest. Frank LaRose, Dolan, all these individuals have expressed an interest, and I'm sure they'll be all part of that running.
Lastly, Jim, the Supreme Court races there in Ohio. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm glad you brought those up. So important. I tell people the two most important issues in Ohio right now, because I truly believe President Trump's going to win in Ohio. I think that's no questions there. Then you have the Bernie Moreno Senate race. But the two really important issues are issue one and the Supreme Court races. In the 90s, when I was in business, we worked extremely hard to get a majority of the Supreme Court as Republicans, because when it was a Democrat majority, they were legislating from the bench, and they were causing business owners nothing but problems, including myself. So we worked very hard to get a solid majority of Republicans, only to see it go away in 2018 when we lost 2, and then in 2020 when we lost 1. So I am a big advocate of making sure we get out, we vote no on issue 1, and please, please, please make sure everybody understands that we cannot afford to lose another Republican in the Supreme Court. And this year, the positive thing is that all of the candidates have an R or D designation beside them. In the past, that didn't occur, so people didn't know. But I am definitely out there stumping to make sure we hold the court and that we have a Republican majority. So vote for the Republican candidates.
Jim Renacci with Jefferson Rising, the PAC, and just been a great source of information for what's going on in Ohio and with elections all over the nation. Of course, former U.S. Congressman. Thank you, Jim, for coming on the program. Really appreciate your insight.
Well, thank you, Tom, for having me, and maybe we can talk again after the election, and we'll see what was right and where I was wrong. And again, that's what we talked about yesterday. Data, data, data. Is the data right? And if it's wrong, what are we missing? Because in the future, elections and processes will all be based on data.